Millionaire CEO gets into his car and hears a 7-year-old black girl telling him to shut up. Can a child's warning save his empire? Shut up and don't say a word. The high-pitched voice cut through the silence of the parking lot like a knife. Jonathan Miller, CEO of Miller Industries, froze with the key in his hand, still outside his black BMW. The order had come from inside the car itself. His eyes adjusted to the dim interior, and he saw a black girl of about 7 huddled in the back seat, her eyes wide with fear. "They're listening," she whispered, pointing discreetly to the corporate building behind him. "Your partner and his blonde wife. They said you'd be here now." Jonathan was 52 years old and had never imagined that his life would change because of a street child. He had founded Miller Industries from scratch, turning it into a technology company valued at $200 million. He had trusted his partner Marcus Williams completely for 15 years and his executive assistant Diana Foster for a decade. "How did you get into my car?" he asked quietly, sliding into the driver's seat without making any sudden movements. "The cleaning lady left it open when she left. I hid because I saw them talking about you upstairs." Her small eyes sparkled with an intelligence that contrasted with her dirty clothes. "They said that tomorrow you won't be the owner of anything anymore." Could this girl hold the key to his survival? Jonathan's blood ran cold. Tomorrow was the meeting with Japanese investors for a $400 million merger. A meeting that Marcus and Diana had meticulously organized. "What else did you hear?" he asked, pretending to fiddle with his cell phone while watching the illuminated windows of the 10th floor. "That you're very stupid and you're going to sign some papers without reading them properly." The blonde woman laughed and said that the day after tomorrow, you'll have to look for another job. The girl shrank further. "They said other nasty things about you, but my grandmother always said that children don't repeat bad words." Jonathan felt a mixture of anger and something surprisingly close to pride. This child had risked her own safety to warn a complete stranger about a betrayal. "What's your name?" "Jasmine." "And yours is Jonathan Miller because I heard them say it 1,000 times." She hesitated. "Are you going to turn me in to the police now?" For the first time in weeks, Jonathan smiled genuinely. "No, Jasmine. In fact, you may have saved everything I'd built in my life." Through the rearview mirror, he saw the office lights going out one by one. Marcus and Diana were probably coming down now, confident that tomorrow would be the day they finally got Jonathan out of the way. What they didn't know was that a millionaire CEO had just found the most unlikely ally possible. And that Jasmine, without knowing it, had given him something far more valuable than any business meeting. Time to prepare. As he drove away from the building, Jonathan was already beginning to formulate a plan. But why would a 7-year-old risk everything to save a man she didn't even know? The answer to that question would change not only her revenge, but her entire perspective on justice. If this story of betrayal and revenge touched you, be sure to subscribe to Black Voices to find out how the person they underestimated the most would become the perfect instrument of their own downfall. Jonathan drove through the quiet streets of the city, his brain processing Jasmine's words like pieces of a puzzle that were finally starting to fit together. In the back seat, the girl remained alert, her eyes fixed on the rear-view mirrors. "Did they say anything else?" she asked, keeping her voice low. The blonde woman said, "You trust them like an obedient little dog." Jasmine grimaced in disgust, "And that tomorrow you'll find out that little dogs sometimes bite their owners." The casual cruelty of that sentence hit Jonathan like a punch in the stomach. 15 years of partnership, 10 years of absolute trust in Diana, and they saw him as a foolish pet. "Where do you live, Jasmine?" "Nowhere in particular." She shrugged with a naturalness that broke his heart. "Sometimes at the shelter, sometimes on the street. It depends if there's room or if the other boys aren't being too annoying." Jonathan stopped at a traffic light and turned to look at her directly. "Why did you tell me? You don't even know me." Jasmine's eyes flashed with premature wisdom. "Because I know what it's like when people think you're invisible. They were talking about you like you're stupid, like you're nothing." Her voice grew firmer. "My grandma always said, when you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help because next time it could be you." The light turned green, but Jonathan remained still for a few seconds, absorbing the lesson in humanity he had just received from a 7-year-old. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in an empty diner. Jasmine devouring a hamburger while Jonathan pretended to drink his cold coffee. His cell phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. "Ready for tomorrow, buddy? The Japanese are going to love our proposal. You're going to retire rich." Jonathan showed the screen to Jasmine, who laughed softly. "He's got some nerve, doesn't he? He's lying to your face and still putting on a happy face. Marcus has always been like that. Charming, convincing." Jonathan typed a friendly reply, masking the anger boiling inside him. "Diana, too. She knows my schedule better than I do. She has access to everything in the company, and you're going to let them fool you tomorrow." Jonathan smiled genuinely for the first time. "No, Jasmine, but they can't know that I know." Another message arrived, this time from Diana. "Jonathan, I've reviewed the final contracts. Everything is perfect for signing. Trust me as you always have." The coldness of that message, disguised as affection, made Jonathan's stomach churn. For 10 years, Diana had been his confidant, the person who organized his life, who knew his schedule, his passwords, his fears. "Do they know things about you?" asked Jasmine, licking her ketchup-stained fingers. "They know everything. Bank passwords, company accounts, where I keep important documents." The magnitude of the betrayal was beginning to sink in. "They've had years to prepare. But you've had years of stuff on them, too, right?" Jonathan stopped with a glass halfway to his lips. Jasmine was right. 15 years of partnership, 10 years of executive assistance. He knew their secrets as well as they knew his. Marcus's gambling debts, Diana's secret affair with a rival CEO, the offshore accounts they had both used to siphon company funds. By the time they reached Jonathan's penthouse, he had a plan. He called his lawyer, Robert Hayes, and outlined everything Jasmine had told him. "Robert, I need you to dig into Marcus and Diana's financials. Every transaction, every offshore account, every email. I suspect they're planning to frame me for fraud during tomorrow's meeting." Robert's voice was firm. "I'll have a preliminary report by morning. In the meantime, keep Jasmine safe. She's a key witness." Jonathan looked at the girl who had fallen asleep on his couch, clutching a pillow. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, Robert arrived with a thick folder. "Marcus and Diana have been moving money into offshore accounts for the last 3 years. They've forged documents to make it look like you authorized the transfers. They plan to present these at the meeting to force you out." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "And Jasmine's warning?" Robert nodded. "She gave us the timeline. Without her, we wouldn't have known to act this fast." At 9 a.m., Jonathan walked into the boardroom with Robert and a team of forensic accountants. Marcus and Diana were already there, smiling confidently. "Gentlemen," Jonathan began, "I've called this emergency meeting to address some serious allegations." He nodded to Robert, who distributed copies of the financial reports. "These documents show that Marcus Williams and Diana Foster have been embezzling company funds and planning to frame me for their crimes." The room erupted in murmurs. Marcus laughed nervously. "This is absurd. Where's your proof?" Robert activated a projector, displaying emails and bank statements linking Marcus and Diana to the offshore accounts. "This is just the beginning," Jonathan said coldly. "We've also recovered security footage from the 10th floor showing you discussing this plan last night." Diana's face paled. "You can't prove anything." Jonathan smiled. "Actually, we can. And we have a witness." He opened the door, and Jasmine walked in, her head held high despite her small stature. She pointed at Marcus and Diana. "I heard you talking about Mr. Jonathan. You said he was stupid and that you'd take everything from him." The board members stared in shock. A 7-year-old had just turned the tables. Marcus tried to protest, but Robert interrupted. "We've already contacted the authorities. They're on their way. Minutes later, police escorted Marcus and Diana out in handcuffs. The board voted unanimously to remove them from their positions. Jonathan looked at the girl who had saved everything he had built in his life. "No, Jasmine. For the first time in years, I'm at peace." "Why?" "Because I've learned that there are people in the world like you. People who do the right thing even when there's nothing in it for them." Outside, Marcus and Diana realized that their arrogance had cost them not only their careers, but their freedom. Inside the room, Jonathan realized that sometimes the greatest gift betrayal can give you is showing you who truly deserves your trust. But one question remained that would change everything. What makes a 7-year-old risk everything to save a stranger? The answer would reveal a connection that even Jonathan could not have imagined. 6 months later, Jonathan was in his new office, much larger than his previous one, watching the city bustle below from the 20th floor. Miller Industries had grown 40% since Marcus and Diana's arrest, finally free of the parasites that had been draining its resources. Gabriel knocked on the door, carrying a briefcase and smiling. "The latest news on our old friends. Marcus sentenced to 12 years in prison. Diana got 8 years. They lost all their assets. Their homes were confiscated to compensate the company. The law firm that represented them refused to continue the case when they found out they tried to bribe witnesses." Jonathan nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction, but not vindictive. "And the other victims, we found 7 more businessmen they defrauded over the last 5 years. All are suing and recovering their losses. Marcus and Diana created a much bigger scheme than we imagined." Jasmine came running in back from the private school Jonathan had enrolled her in. His uniform was spotless, his new backpack on his back, his eyes shining with the same intelligence as always, but now nourished by education and security. "Mr. Jonathan, I got an A on my math test." She waved the paper proudly. "Congratulations, Jasmine. I knew you could do it." Gabriel smiled, watching the interaction. It's still surreal how a 7-year-old saved a $200 million company. "Actually," Jonathan said, sitting down to be at Jasmine's height, "there's something you both need to know. Something I found out a few weeks ago." He pulled out a folder of legal documents. "Jasmine, do you remember your grandmother's name?" "Of course. Josephine Miller." "Why?" Gabriel raised his eyebrows. Miller like Jonathan opened the folder, revealing birth certificates, genealogical documents, old photos. "Josephine Miller was my cousin, my father's brother's daughter, whom the family lost contact with over 30 years ago." The silence in the room was absolute. Jasmine looked from the documents to Jonathan, processing the information. "That means that we're real family," Jonathan said softly. "Your grandmother always talked about you to the social workers about how smart and brave you were. When I started investigating after that night, all the pieces fell into place." Jasmine threw herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "I knew it. I knew you were different. Grandma always said that family takes care of family." Gabriel cleared his throat, clearly moved. "So when she warned you about the conspiracy, it was family protection instinct," Jonathan finished. "She didn't consciously know we were related, but something inside her recognized the connection." 3 months later, the official adoption ceremony was held in the same courthouse where Marcus and Diana had been convicted. Jasmine, now legally Jasmine Miller, wore a light blue dress and held Jonathan's hand tightly. The judge smiled as he signed the final documents. It's rare to see a story that begins with crime and ends with a family reunited. Later at the celebratory restaurant, Jasmine looked at Jonathan with that seriousness peculiar to children. "Mr. Jonathan, Dad, do you think Grandma knew this was going to happen?" Jonathan thought about the question, remembering how Jasmine had appeared in his life just when he needed her most. "I think your grandmother knew a lot more than we realize, and I think she would be very proud to see how you saved our family." On the first anniversary of Marcus and Diana's arrest, Jonathan received 2 letters in the same week. The first was from Marcus from prison, a pathetic attempt to apologize and suggest that it had all been a misunderstanding. The second was from Diana, also from prison, blaming Marcus for everything and trying to play the victim. Jonathan tore up both letters without finishing them. They still don't get it, Jasmine said, looking at the pieces of paper in the trash. It's not about forgiving or not forgiving. It's about moving on and being better. The wisdom of that child still surprised Jonathan every day. 5 years later, Miller Industries had become one of the 100 largest technology companies in the country. Jonathan created a scholarship program for vulnerable children, funding education and housing for more than 200 children annually. Jasmine, now 12, was the honorary president of the program, personally choosing the beneficiaries and mentoring other young people who were going through similar difficulties to those she had faced. Do you know what the best day of my life was? Jasmine asked during the program's anniversary dinner. What was it? The day I got in your car and decided to trust you. Because that day, I wasn't just saving your company, I was saving our family. Jonathan smiled, looking at the girl who had become his daughter and his greatest source of pride. Marcus and Diana had tried to destroy everything he had built. But they had inadvertently given him the greatest gift of his life. The chance to discover that family isn't just blood. It's also courage, loyalty, and unconditional love. He had learned that true revenge isn't destroying those who betray you. It's building something so beautiful and powerful that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in the story of your success. Marcus and Diana tried to steal his company, but ended up giving him much more than they could ever imagine. A daughter, a purpose, and proof that sometimes the universe uses the most unlikely people to give us exactly what we need. If this story of family, justice, and second chances touched your heart, subscribe to Black Voices for more stories that prove that true victory isn't about defeating enemies, but about discovering the allies who have always been by our side, just waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves.